Good morning, good evening, or wherever you are in the world, whatever time of day it is. I'm really glad you've joined me. But before we get started, a couple of guidelines. This is just a reminder that all the content and information in any of my episodes are general guidelines, which means they may or may not apply to your specific business, project, or drilling application. They are basically for educational and informational purposes only. And, if it applies, and if you want to talk about specific projects and where it may apply, don't hesitate to reach out to me and we will talk about that and maybe talk about adjustments that can be made based on some information you heard here. So, without further ado, welcome back to The Mud Report with me, Chantel Stone. As always, this is brought to you by SLURRYWORX. Now, we're already on episode 3, the strength of the gel. And I am so excited to talk about this week because there is a lot about gel strength. It's kind of a hidden thing that we don't give enough credit to. And when it's not working for us, we know it, we just don't know why. So let's kick this off. Now, the reason I'm so excited to talk about this property today is because many times I run into customers that they actually don't even know about this property. The whole time they thought, this is what viscosity is doing. In reality, it's actually this guy over here, our gel strength. It's how strong our mud is under certain circumstances. We're going to talk all about that. So, yes, I'm very excited to talk about this and to give a better understanding around what this property truly does for us and how critical it can be in some applications. So let's kick this off. All right, so I guess the best way to truly kick this off is to describe what a gel strength actually is. So I think before I can say any more, I've got to say that gel strength is unique in all the properties you can build in a drilling fluid. And oftentimes it is the one that is ignored or, like I said, not even known about. Maybe we didn't even know that a mud could create a gel or a gel strength. And oftentimes it is confused with seeing a very, very thick mud, a high viscosity mud. But here's the thing. It is independent. It is completely separate than your marsh funnel numbers or the viscosity that you may read on a rotational viscometer like a fan 35 or even a hand crank rheometer if you're familiar with those. It's independent of the mud cake that you measure or the filtrate that you get. It is its own property. So unless we are measuring it, we really don't know what our gels are because nothing else is going to tell us. So now we know it is its own property. So what is it? Well, let's go into that scenario again where we've built up our mud and now we are starting to pump our mud and it's going down the hole. It doesn't matter if it's a vertical hole or if it's a horizontal hole. The mud's going down and filling up our annular space, and then something breaks or we have to stop for some reason, or we're just adding on rods or drill string, even that short amount of time. When we stop pumping mud, when we stop flowing and pumping our drilling fluid, in that whether short amount of time or long extended amount of time, our mud we normally would want our mud to build what's called a gel strength. And that gel strength means that the bentonite in our fluid, because remember, I kind of mentioned this in another episode, that bentonite is the only product that can build a gel strength. Can't do it with just polymers. It has to have bentonite starting as your base of your fluid. That bentonite is only capable of building gel strength. So the bentonite in that fluid will have to reorient itself in a certain way. In other words, instead of being these, flowing platelets, which they are, and I'll talk a lot more about this in another episode. They will orient themselves to gel that fluid up. Now, this sounds familiar, why we call it gel strength. Gel the fluid so that it will hold cuttings in suspension until we can get the fluid flowing again, whether we're getting a pump fixed or something else broke, or maybe a hose line broke and we had to stop pumping our fluid to fix the line, or whatever it is, or maybe it's just for a super short amount of time that we're, adding on another drill string or we're adding on another rod. So it's all based on amount of time and how much gels will build in that amount of time to hold cuttings in suspension. Now, why did we want to hold cuttings in suspension? I'm going to talk about this in a minute. But we want those gels to form and basically keep us from having further problems once we want to get moving again. So the only way you can measure a gel is by using either some type of rotational viscometer, whether it is a 6-speed fan 35A or it's a hand crank rheometer. Whatever it is, we can collect the gel strength off of that. Now, gels are measured in a very specific set of units. It's pound per 100 square feet. Now, pounds per 100 square feet is unique. That is actually a measurement of energy, of force, and actually of pressure, force and pressure. So when we talk about, how much gels are created, what we're really talking about is not just suspension of our cuttings. It's also the amount of force that we will need to get that fluid started again. And that amount of force is in pounds per 100 square feet. That gives you, you may have a low amount of force to get it started, which means your gel strength is low, maybe pretty fragile, and that may or may not hold your cuttings up. Or the gel may be high and it takes a lot more force or pressure, but we have to be careful because we don't want to add too much pressure onto our system, because we know what happens then. So, and we can measure it based on varied amounts of time. So very commonly we will measure it off of letting a fluid set for 10 seconds and then seeing how much force it takes to break it after 10 seconds. That's kind of how we say it's indicative of changing out a drill string or changing out a rod, something like that. It's not exact, but it gives you that short-term gel strength. Then we may have a 10-minute gel. Maybe we had to stop for a short amount of time. So we watch the difference between how much pressure or force it takes to break that gel between 10 seconds and letting it set static for 10 minutes. And then there's an extra one called a 30-minute gel. So we're just letting it set longer. That doesn't mean if you have an issue, you're only broke down for 30 minutes. No, we may be broke down for hours or, even longer. It's just giving you an idea of over an extended period of time, if a drilling fluid were to sit in your hole longer, how much gel strength will it build over time? And then we can look at all these numbers that we've collected and go, is our gel staying very, very flat? Not normally something we want. Or is our gels, just continuing to climb? That's not really something we want either, because that means, we may build too much pressure. We actually want to see a very specific gel profile. So gel strength is incredibly important for numerous reasons. And, more so with the HDD industry. In a horizontal bore, gel strengths are critical in this industry. I'm not saying they're not important in water wells and any other vertical hole, be it geothermal, geotech, even in the mining industry. And there's some places we have to be careful with those. But it's so critical in the HDD industry that we we need this particular property, and this is absolutely seems to be the place where we get gel strength and viscosity confused the most. So as we move on, let's talk about how those gels really impact other, basically our operations overall. So oftentimes when we build our mud, we observe our mud, and I'll be honest, I do as well. But we can't read properties. We can't understand what our mud's truly doing just by looking at it. And to be real honest with you, the only property we actually can see with our eyes, observe, is viscosity and how thick the mud gets. Because we can see thick and we can see thin, and we can make judgments off of that. However, and if you caught my viscosity episode, you'll know where I'm going with this. Viscosity is one property, and it does not tell us what other properties are doing. So unfortunately, though, this leads over specifically into gel strengths, because viscosity is the property that is often very confused with a gel strength. In other words, if I have a very thick mud, therefore my mud must be gelling up and holding cuttings and suspension. Even if you didn't know what a gel strength was or did before now, there is an assumption that if my mud is very, very thick, then it must have good suspension to it. And so we must be good to go, right? And the very frustrating reality of that is when we start to drill and we thought we have a nice thick mud, we saw what we wanted to see. We took a marsh funnel reading and it's really high, and so that's great. It's gonna suspend our cuttings. If we did have equipment break, we have no problems. And then we get to drilling and we start having problems, and we don't understand why. Maybe because, hey, we had a thick mud, and you know what? I had a hose break. I need to, stop pumping my fluid, leave it in the hole, fix this hose. May take an hour or two, or longer, and then we'll get going again. And then once we get going, then we all of a sudden have a tight hole. We can't get the cuttings out of the way. We're not getting our flow back. And if we're not getting our flow back, now we're increasing pressures, and we're watching those pressures and our torque increase. And all of a sudden we maybe even break the formation and start losing all of our fluid. It's taking a big drink of it. And what in the world happened? And that leads to an awful lot of confusion. So here's where I really want to talk about, all of the things that this built into. Because when we built that really, really thick fluid, we did make an assumption that that fluid looks thick. It looks like jelly. So gels, it's gelled up. That must mean it will suspend our cuttings. It'll do everything we need it to do when we run into other issues. And maybe we need to leave the fluid in the hole. Honestly, the reality about that is, and the risk that we put ourselves under, is we didn't actually check our gels, or we didn't know that we had a gel strength, didn't have a gel strength. And really all we had was a thick fluid. I don't know if you know this, but we can actually have an exceptionally thick fluid, a very high marsh funnel viscosity, and have nil on gel strength. In other words, we could have a very thick fluid that you have to take a lot of energy to pump, but you have no suspension in that fluid. And I know that seems so counter to the way the fluid looks or what we think it's going to do, but that's the truth. And that goes right back to our properties being independent of each other. That is true to the statement of our properties being independent, that viscosity and gels aren't correlating to each other. So gel strength is so important to know and measure and make sure that we have picked a bentonite that is giving us the gel strengths that we need. because the reality is weak gels, poor gel strength that is too low for our application or for the type of cuttings we're trying to suspend, that poor gel strength, that low gel strength, that gel strength that's not enough, means that we have poor suspension whenever we stop pumping that fluid, stop moving that fluid. And when that fluid is in our hole and has poor suspension, the cuttings that were in that fluid now start moving with gravity, which means down, whether you're in a long vertical hole or you're in a horizontal hole, it all goes downward. And the reason it is so critical in the HDD industry is because you don't have very far for it to fall. I mean, even if you had farther to fall, you really don't have very long or very far for it to fall to start creating cutting beds. And once that happens, your hole gets tighter and tighter. It starts closing in, and you're going to have a lot of trouble getting your drill rods back, your bit or your reamer back through a cutting bed that's built up. Now, I keep talking how critical it is for the HDD industry. The vertical drilling industry, the water wells, and I like talking about water wells specifically because they tend to be bigger diameter, that they really have, it's critical for them as well, because if you don't have enough gel strength, although you have when you have a long column of fluid, you have a little more time to build gels than you do in the HDD industry. But you still need gels because you don't want these cuttings, whether they're pebbles or gravels or, larger, maybe quarter-size cuttings of clay or even sand, to fall through your mud and land on top of your bit. Because if you get enough piled up, if you have to stay, if you are broke down for too long and you have to stay broke down for hours, maybe days, if the amount of cuttings that start falling down on your bit get too great, you have a severe risk of completely losing your tooling. And that is an expensive risk to take. So, in these type of scenarios, you have some pretty high risks when we don't build enough gels in. You don't just risk getting stuck. You risk losing very expensive equipment. You risk losing time having to redo a hole. You risk money, you risk the project, and in the end, you risk credibility. So it kind of sounds like it's such a little thing to pay attention to with a lot of high risks involved. So when we're building our mud, here's where I'm going to push hard on know what the bentonite you've selected does, what properties it gives you. Here's where I'm going back to that, because I'm going to talk about the HDD industry. You need that bentonite, that product, whatever it is you've selected, you need one that's going to build the gels that you need. You don't need just one that's going to build thickness, because I'm going to say it over and over. Viscosity and gel strength are two completely independent properties. Seeing a thick mud doesn't mean you're going to get suspension. And not getting enough suspension when you need it is going to cause you a lot of trouble. You risk a lot by not selecting the products that are going to give you the property that you need. So make sure that you know the type of gel strengths in the bentonite that you've selected, and you tune that to the project that you're on. And it's not just a high viscosity mud. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say again, I like a low to moderate viscosity bentonite product that gives me some nice gels. And so I'm going to lean that way for you guys, for the HDD part of the industry. Now on the vertical side, I am going to look again to a low to moderate viscosity bentonite. The gels don't have to be as critical, but I'm still going to look for some gel strength for you guys. I'm going to look for a very specific profile of gels. I'm going to make sure that in the instant something happens and you have to stop, pumping and flowing your mud, you're not going to run into the issues of cutting settling down on your bit. So it's still very important that I'm going to look for a drilling product, a bentonite product that's going to give you the gels that you need. Because in all the industries, this is really, really critical. There's only a couple of places that are unique, that gels are not quite as important, but it's the nature of the application. And I'll talk about that in future episodes. So remember, it's not about thickness and viscosity that holds your cuttings up when you stop circulating. It is about your gel strengths that's going to give you the suspension when that mud stops flowing. All right, so if you have hung in here with me this far, here's where I'm going to give you a great pro tip. All right, so for those of you who already knew about gel strengths and you're building those in your mud, or maybe you just learned about them today and you are excited to build them in your mud, here is your pro tip. I'm going to start off with a question. If you are going to go break your gels, and let me describe what that means. So your fluid has been setting in your hole static, and you are ready to get that fluid, that drill mud, flowing and moving again. What are you going to do to get that fluid moving? And if you know where I'm going with this, or if you've already done it, is the first thing you do flip your pumps on to get it moving? I am going to give you the best pro tip that's going to be project changing. So instead of flipping that pump on, cranking it up to force that fluid to get moving again, to force the pump to break those gels, because what you do is you actually force excess pressure into your borehole, into your formation, which we know excess pressure on our geology is bad. I'm going to recommend slowly start rotating your drill string. Do not turn your pump on yet. Rotate your drill string, and that will, or your rods, depending on your industry, and that will start gently breaking your gels down. As you're rotating, gently, slowly bring your pumps online. Don't crank them on and get the pressure and try to push that fluid flowing. Slowly pull them online after your drill string, your rods are rotating. And that will break the gels and even out the pressures that's being exerted on the system. And you can so much more easily get that fluid flowing again. So that is your special pro tip and your reward for hanging through this whole episode with me. But that's not all. Now, I don't sell testing equipment, but I do recommend testing equipment. I recommend the whole slew of equipment that you can have on site, because I'm gonna say this: if I'm going on site, I'm having my equipment with me. I'm having my testing equipment with me, because that mud is talking and I want to know what it's saying. And the only way to know that is by testing your properties. And so I can't adjust that mud, make sure it's doing what it needs to in the hole without using my testing equipment, getting those results, and making sure, reading the mud properties to make sure that that fluid is doing everything I need it to do in that specific, that hole, that application, in the geology, with your tooling, the whole 9 yards. You need to tune it all in together. So that might raise the question, all right, Chantel, how much gel strength do I need? I'm I'm sure you know I can't tell you that, right? Because honestly, it is all tuned in to the diameter of your hole, the depth or length of your hole or bore, the type of equipment that you're using, how big is your pump, how much are you able to flow, what type of reamer are you going to use, what type of bit are you going to use, how big of a cut are you going to make initially, how much are you going to step up in the reaming, if you're in the HDD industry. It's actually, and then we're always going back to geology. Geology is so important in determining, how we're going to build our muds. So I wish I could tell you, yep, you need a 10-second gel of 15 pounds per 100 square feet, or you need a 10-minute gel of 2,600 pounds per square feet. The thing is, I just can't. I can't give you exact numbers. And I know how that can feel so frustrating. Just come on, tell me what I need. But it's all based on all the other factors that you have going on. So if you did call me up and say, hey, how much gel strength do I need to build? And then you gave me the details of the project. And if you call me, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions and finding out more about what you're dealing with or what you plan to deal with. I can tune the numbers in closer to what you need. And if you really need some help, if you want to do some on-site training, then I can build you a mud more specific to your projects. So if you're interested in learning how to measure a gel strength or any other property, and what those gel strengths mean and how to build the right ones into your fluid, I'm going to invite you to give me a call or send me an email, and let's schedule you a mud school today. We can do as short as a day mud school up to a full-blown 4-day covering everything type of mud school, which means we will talk about products, we'll talk about properties. I'll show you how to test everything and you will get to do it. We'll build some muds, we'll talk about mixing, we'll talk about problems, and we'll go over solutions. It will be more information that you ever thought was possible about mud, about a drilling fluid. So if you're interested in learning more, don't hesitate to reach out. If you just want to talk about your specific project, that is great too. I would love to do that. So please reach out. I look forward to hearing from you. Well, we're already here at the end of episode 3. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you did, please hit that like button. If you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the episodes that are coming, because we've got some great content coming your way. We're going to talk more about products and product types. We're going to talk about properties, of course, and we're going to talk about some great practical tips that can really help on all kinds of different drilling applications. So I really look forward to this. I hope you can hang in there with me. I want to thank you for watching. Love for you to comment. Again, I will read them all and I'll try to get back to as many of you as possible. And remember, here at SLURRYWORX, we want to make your slurry work for you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.